caress. Motojiro Kajii. A cat's ears are truly peculiar things. They are thin, cool, and covered with velvety fur on the outside, while the inside is smooth and shiny, almost like the skin of a bamboo shoot. They are both firm and soft at the same time, made of some unique, indescribable material. Ever since I was a child, I've been irresistibly drawn to the idea of snapping a cat's ear as if I were a ticket cutter, just giving it a quick snip. Is this a cruel thought? No, I don't think so. It's the strange and mysterious quality of a cat's ear that provokes such a thought. I can never forget the sight of a strict guest at our house absent-mindedly pinching a kitten's ear while conversing, completely engrossed in the act. Such strange obsessions can be remarkably persistent. Fantasies, even as childish as snapping a cat's ear with a ticket cutter, linger in the recesses of our minds, surviving long past the age when we should know better. Like a grown adult who still wonders, what if I just once cut through a sandwich made of stiff cardboard? These thoughts, though we might dismiss them as trivial, remain until we act on them. Recently, however, I discovered that this fantasy was based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Cats, it turns out, don't mind having their ears pulled, not unlike a rabbit being picked up by the ears. Cat ears, it seems, have a peculiar structure. If you look closely, you'll notice that most cats have a small tear in their ears, a scar of sorts. Over time, it appears that this tear gets patched up, and this little patch, whether you're a believer in creationism or evolution, remains as one of the oddest features of a cat's ear. It even seems to act as a kind of buffer when the ear is pulled. Because of this, cats seem unfazed by having their ears tugged. What about pressure? Even when squeezed tightly, a cat's ear doesn't seem to bother it much. Like the guest who pinched the kitten's ear earlier, you can pinch a cat's ear quite firmly, and it will rarely cry out. Because of this resilience, it's easy to imagine that a cat's ear is almost indestructible, which might lead one to think it could even withstand the ticket cutter treatment. One day, while playing with a cat, I finally bit its ear. This was my discovery. The moment I bit down, the creature let out an immediate yelp. In that instant, my long-held fantasy shattered. It turns out that being bitten on the ear is the most painful thing for a cat. The cry starts as the faintest sound and grows louder the harder you bite, like a perfect crescendo from a woodwind instrument. And so my old fantasy dissolved just like that. But it seems that there's no end to such whims. Lately, I've started to imagine something else entirely. What if we were to cut off all of a cat's claws? What would become of the cat? I imagine it would eventually die. As usual, it would try to climb a tree, only to fail. It would attempt to pounce on a person's clothing, but it would be different. It would try to sharpen its claws, but find nothing there. Most likely, the cat would keep trying these things over and over, only to slowly realize that something fundamental about itself had changed. It would gradually lose confidence. Without its claws, the very things that once protected it from falling, the cat would begin to tremble, no longer secure even in its own height. The cat would become a different creature, staggering around until, eventually, it wouldn't even do that. It would fall into despair. And with constant nightmares of terror haunting its thoughts, it would lose the will to eat and finally, it would die. A clawless cat. How pitiable, how helpless such a creature would feel. It would be like a poet who had lost their imagination, or a genius fallen into early dementia. This fantasy always saddens me. The sadness is so overwhelming that I no longer care whether the conclusion is logical or not. Still, what would really happen to a cat if it lost its claws? A cat can survive even if its eyes or whiskers are removed. But those claws, hidden within the soft pads of its paws, hooked like sharp daggers, those are the cat's vitality, its wisdom, its very spirit. I firmly believe this. One day, I had a strange dream. It took place in the private room of a woman named X. This woman usually had a sweet cat, and whenever I visited it, she would release it from her arms, sending it toward me, much to my dismay. Every time I picked it up, I would catch a faint scent of perfume lingering on the kitten. In the dream, she was standing in front of a mirror, putting on makeup. I was casually glancing at her while reading a newspaper, when suddenly I gasped in shock. To my horror, she was applying face powder with a cat's paw. The sight sent shivers down my spine, but upon closer inspection, I realized it was some kind of makeup tool that merely resembled a cat's paw. Yet, it was so bizarre that I couldn't help but ask from behind her, "What is that thing you're rubbing on your face?" "This," she replied with a smile, turning toward me. Then she casually tossed it in my direction. I caught it, and to my astonishment, it really was a cat's paw. "What is this? Where did you get it?" I asked, and in that moment, like a flash of lightning, I understood why her usual kitten was absent that day, and why the paw seemed eerily familiar. It was the front paw of her cat. "You already know, don't you?" she said, still smiling. "This is Mule's front paw." Her response was calm and composed. She explained that it had become trendy in foreign countries to use such things, so she decided to try it with Mule's paw. Internally, I was appalled by her cruelty, and I asked if she had done this herself. She replied that it had been made by the janitor at the medical school. I had heard rumors that these medical school janitors buried the heads of dissected bodies to produce skulls and secretly sold them to students. So the idea left me feeling disgusted. Why would she involve someone like that? I began to detest the insensitivity and cruelty of women when it came to such matters, as if this were a fresh realization. Still, I vaguely recalled reading something similar about this trend in a women's magazine or newspaper. A makeup tool made from a cat's paw. I would often grab the front paw of a cat, laughing to myself as I stroked its fur. The short, dense fur on the side of the paw that the cat uses to wash its face was like the pile of a thick carpet. Yes, it could almost pass as a human makeup brush. But what use could I possibly have for such a thing? I lay back on the floor, rolled over, and placed the cat on my face. I held its two soft paws and pressed their warm pads against my eyelids. The gentle weight of the cat and the warmth of its paws brought me a sense of deep, otherworldly rest that soothed my tired eyes. "Dear kitten, please, I beg of you, stay still for a little while longer. You always dig your claws in too soon."